Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. Today, we're going to tackle something I think that impacts us all,
Yeah,
even if we don't, actually write code,
yeah,
and that's software architecture.
absolutely.
Um, if you imagine you're building a house,
Yeah.
the architecture is kind of like the foundation,
Mm-hmm.
right? It determines how strong, how flexible,
Yeah, for sure.
and how adaptable the house is in the future.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
And, just like with houses, there are all these different architectural styles for software.
Right.
And today we're going to dive into two of the most popular ones, clean architecture
Okay.
and vertical slice architecture.
Interesting.
We've got a whole stack of articles and blog posts here from industry experts ready to go.
Yeah, we've been doing our research.
And by the end of this deep dive, I think you'll understand how these approaches actually end up shaping the software that you use every single day.
Yeah, it's one of those things that is invisible to us,
It really is.
but it's so fundamental to how well things work.
For sure.
So let's start with clean architecture.
Okay.
From what I've gathered, it's all about organizing code into distinct layers. Almost like a layer cake, I guess,
Right.
based on their responsibilities.
Exactly.
You have your core business logic, kind of like the rules of your application.
Yeah, the brains of the operation.
Exactly. And that's kept separate from the details of how data is stored or how the user interface looks.
Exactly. Think of it like this. The core of your application, the business logic, shouldn't care whether you're using a database or a file system to store data, or even how the user interacts with it through the UI.
Right.
That's the beauty of this separation.
And this is achieved through something called dependency inversion.
Yeah, it's a big word.
It sounds very complex.
It sounds really complex, but it's basically a fancy way of saying we're going to flip the script.
Okay.
Instead of the core logic depending on the details now depend on the core logic.
Interesting.
This means you can easily swap out those details, like switching from one database to another, without affecting the core of your application.
Oh, I see. So it's like, being able to renovate your house without having to rebuild the entire foundation.
You got it. That's a great way to put it.
Just swap out the kitchen or something.
Exactly. And this makes your software adaptable to change and easier to maintain in the long run.
Which is essential, right? Because technology is always changing.
Always changing.
But this adaptability, our research shows it comes with some trade-offs.
It always does, right?
Yeah.
There's no such thing as a free lunch.
Clean architecture can be a little bit more complex to set up initially, especially for smaller projects.
Smaller projects, yeah.
So that makes sense. If you're building like a simple to-do list app,
Right.
you probably don't need this kind of robust structure.
You're probably over-engineering at that point.
And some of the articles even said for small projects, the extra effort might not be worth the benefits.
It's about choosing the right tool for the job.
Okay.
Clean architecture really shines when you need that long-term flexibility and maintainability.
Right.
Especially for large, complex systems where changes are inevitable, like a enterprise software or something.
Okay, so clean architecture, it's like building a house with a strong, adaptable foundation.
Oh, I like it.
What about vertical slice architecture?
Okay.
I know our notes say it's a different way of slicing the cake, so to speak.
Instead of separating by those technical layers, like we talked about, the data, the UI,
Mm-hmm.
vertical slice architecture organizes code by features.
Okay.
So imagine you're building a food delivery app, right?
Okay, yeah, I'm hungry.
You would have one slice for the entire ordering process,
Okay.
another slice for tracking those deliveries,
Uh-huh.
and then a whole separate slice for managing payments.
Interesting.
Each of those slices contains all the code necessary for that feature, from the UI all the way down to the database.
So everything's kind of self-contained in these slices.
Exactly.
So if I'm a developer working on, let's say, the order tracking feature, I have everything I need within that slice.
You got it.
I don't have to be jumping around different parts of the code base.
Makes it much easier to work on.
Makes sense. Much more focused. But some of the articles did raise concerns about potential code duplication.
Yeah, that's a good point.
If each slice is self-contained, wouldn't you end up with similar code in different slices?
Yeah, that's a valid concern and something you have to keep in mind as you're designing it, but you can actually mitigate that risk
Okay.
by carefully planning your slices and using tools like immediate R pipelines.
Right.
These pipelines act like a central hub for handling tasks that are common across multiple features.
Like logging or validation.
Exactly, like logging validation.
So instead of each slice having to reinvent the wheel for that stuff, it's all kind of centralized.
Centralized, you got it.
So it's like having a shared utility room in your house where everyone can access the tools they need.
I love these analogies. I think they're really helping to paint the picture. Vertical slice architecture really encourages a more modular approach And it also ends up making it easier for developers to grasp and work with, especially compared to the sometimes abstract concepts of clean architecture.
Okay, so we have these two distinct architectural approaches.
Yeah.
Clean architecture focusing on separating concerns,
Yeah.
and then vertical slice architecture emphasizing feature-based organization.
Mm-hmm.
Both have their pros and cons.
For sure.
Now, what I found really interesting was that some of the experts actually suggested combining these two.
Interesting.
Is that even possible? Can you have like a layered cake with vertical slices?
You absolutely can. And in fact, combining them can be incredibly effective,
Okay.
especially for complex applications.
Right.
You get the best of both worlds.
Interesting.
You can use clean architecture to define the core structure of your application,
Like the foundation.
exactly like the domain and infrastructure layers.
Okay.
And then you can slice those layers vertically for each feature.
So it's almost like taking a cross-section of that layered cake and seeing all the different flavors within each slice.
That's a great way to visualize it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and by combining clean architecture's separation of concerns with vertical slice architecture's feature focus, you get an application that's both robust and easy to work with.
So you get the strength and the flexibility.
Exactly.
Awesome.
It's a powerful combination.
Well, this has been fascinating so far.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying this.
We've covered the what of these architectures,
Mm-hmm.
but I think in the next part, we need to dive into the why.
Sounds good.
Why should we care about this?
Absolutely.
How does this impact us as users?
Great question.
So stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive into software architecture.
Can't wait.
All right, so we've talked about what these architectures are like. They have the layers in clean architecture,
Yeah.
the features in vertical slice architecture, even that idea of combining them like a hybrid approach.
The best of both worlds.
But now I think the big question is like, why should we care?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
As users, how does this impact us? Like, why does it matter how the code is structured behind the scenes?
Well, think about it. Have you ever used an app that's constantly crashing?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Or it's super slow to load?
Drives me crazy.
Or maybe it's just difficult to navigate, like you can't find what you're looking for.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced all of those frustrations.
Well, a lot of times those frustrations actually come from poor architectural choices.
Interesting.
So a well-structured application, whether it's using clean architecture vertical slices or even a combination of the two, generally leads to a much smoother and more reliable experience for you as a user.
So it's not just about making life easier for the developers.
No, not at all.
It actually translates to a better experience for us.
Exactly.
So how does that actually work? Like, how does this arrangement of code, how does that impact me sitting here using an app?
Let's take maintainability as an example.
Okay.
Clean architecture, remember, with its separation of concerns, it makes it much easier for developers to fix bugs and add new features without accidentally breaking something else in the process.
Right, so it's less likely to just fall apart when they make a change.
Exactly, and this means fewer crashes for you and faster updates.
Oh, so I'm less likely to encounter those dreaded, unexpected error messages.
Hopefully.
That's a win in my book.
For sure, nobody likes those.
Okay, what else?
Well, then there's scalability.
Okay.
As an app grows, more and more users are coming on board.
Mm-hmm.
A well-architected system can handle that increased load without sacrificing performance.
Right, because I've definitely used apps that just seem to slow down to a crawl when there are a lot of people using them.
Yeah, like when you're trying to book a concert ticket and the app crashes because too many people are trying to buy tickets at the same time.
Oh, the worst.
Super frustrating.
Yeah, it's like the digital equivalent of waiting in a never-ending line.
Exactly.
Okay, so scalability is about making sure the app can grow without falling apart.
Right. Handle that increased traffic, handle more data without becoming sluggish.
So maintainability keeps things running smoothly.
Yep.
Scalability means it can handle growth.
Mm-hmm.
What other ways does architecture impact my experience as a user?
Well, how about team collaboration?
Okay.
When developers can work on different features simultaneously.
Like with vertical slice architecture.
Exactly, without stepping on each other's toes.
Right.
It leads to faster development cycles and more frequent updates.
Oh, so that means I get new features and improvements more quickly.
Precisely. It's not just about preventing bad experiences. It's also about enabling faster innovation.
Okay, so there's a positive side too.
Absolutely.
It's not just about making things less bad.
It's about making things actively better.
Interesting. I'm starting to see how this seemingly technical topic, something that's kind of hidden behind the scenes, actually has a real impact on me.
It all comes back to the user experience.
Okay, so we've got maintainability, scalability, team collaboration. What else am I missing?
How about security?
Oh, right. That's a big one.
Huge. And a well-architected app tends to be much more secure.
Okay.
Because with those clear separation of concerns like we see in clean architecture, security vulnerabilities can be isolated and addressed more effectively.
So it's like if one part of the app has a problem, it doesn't necessarily bring down the whole thing.
Exactly. And it's easier to fix those problems without creating new ones in the process.
So my data is less likely to be compromised.
Exactly. That's the goal.
That's definitely a top priority for me.
Absolutely. And I think understanding these architectural principles, it kind of empowers you to ask the right questions about the software you use.
Interesting.
Like you can inquire about how developers are addressing security concerns,
Okay.
how they plan to handle future growth,
Makes sense.
how they're going to ensure that the app is maintainable in the long run.
So it's like being an informed consumer.
Exactly. You can make better decisions about which apps you trust and use based on how they're built.
I like that. Instead of just blindly trusting that everything's going to be okay.
Right, because not all apps are created equal.
So we've talked a lot about the conceptual side of things.
Yeah, the big picture.
I'm curious to see how these architectures actually play out in the real world.
Yeah, let's get specific.
Let's shift gears and explore some concrete examples. And I think one area that's particularly fascinating is mobile apps.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
They're everywhere, right? They've become so central to our lives for everything.
It's amazing how much we rely on them.
From ordering food to managing our finances to, staying connected with friends and family.
It's incredible how much they've changed our lives.
So I'm curious to know how clean architecture and vertical slice architecture, how do they translate to this mobile world?
That's a great area to dive into.
Okay.
Because mobile apps present some unique challenges and opportunities.
Right, because you're dealing with these tiny little devices.
Tiny, powerful devices.
Yeah, with limited resources.
Definitely. Let's explore that in the next segment.
Okay, so we're stepping into the world of mobile apps, these tiny but powerful tools we use for everything these days.
I know. It's amazing how much complexity is packed into those little devices.
It really is, and I think the architectural choices that are made during development, they have a huge impact on how well those apps perform, how easily they can be updated, even how secure they are.
Absolutely.
So let's start with clean architecture.
Okay.
How does that layered approach, separating the business logic from all those nitty-gritty details?
Yeah.
How does that work when you're talking about a mobile app?
Well, the core principles are the same, right?
Okay.
You still want to isolate the core functionality of the app from things like the user interface or the specific database being used.
Right.
But mobile app development, it has some unique constraints.
Okay.
Like you have limited resources, you have to worry about battery life.
Right, because nobody wants an app that drains their battery.
Exactly. And users expect a very smooth and responsive experience.
Yeah, they're used to things happening quickly.
Yeah, you don't want any lag.
So you can't just take a desktop apps architecture
Right.
and kind of shrink it down and expect it to work on mobile.
You can't just shrink it down. You have to really consider those mobile-specific factors.
Okay.
But the benefits of clean architecture, they still apply.
Okay.
For example, imagine you're building a travel app
Okay.
with clean architecture. The core logic for booking flights or hotels, that wouldn't be tied to whether the user is on an iPhone or an Android device.
Right, it shouldn't matter what device they're using.
Exactly. And it wouldn't be directly connected to how those bookings are actually displayed on the screen.
So even if the app gets a major redesign or something,
Right, a fresh coat of paint.
the core booking engine, that stays the same.
Exactly. You don't have to mess with it.
Untouched.
Yeah. And if you need to switch from one mapping provider to another,
Okay.
you can do that without rewriting the entire booking system.
So it's very adaptable.
Very adaptable. And that flexibility, it's crucial in the mobile world because things change so quickly.
Things move fast, yeah.
Yeah. New devices, new operating systems, updates all the time.
Our notes mentioned something called MVVM
Oh, yeah.
as a popular way to implement clean architecture in mobile apps.
Yes.
What is that exactly?
So MVVM stands for Model View View Model.
Okay.
It's a pattern that helps you structure your code according to those clean architecture principles.
Okay.
So the model that represents your data and your business logic.
Right.
The view, that's your user interface.
Okay.
And then the view model kind of acts as a bridge between the two.
So it's like a translator almost.
A translator, yeah, that's
Yeah.
a good way to think about it.
So the view model makes sure that the data is displayed correctly in the user interface. But the core logic of the app, it doesn't need to know how that's happening.
Exactly. It keeps things nicely separated.
Interesting. Okay, now what about vertical slice architecture in the mobile world?
All right, so remember, this approach organizes code by features rather than those technical layers.
Right, so remember, this approach organizes code by features rather than those technical layers.
Right, so for our travel app, we'd have one slice for search and flights.
Another for booking hotels and so on.
Exactly. Each slice contains everything needed for that feature.
Yeah.
UI elements, business logic, data handling.
And this is particularly beneficial for mobile development
Sure
because
is.
it allows different teams to work on different features at the same time.
Yeah. Without stepping on each other's toes.
Right, without breaking each other's code.
Exactly. Parallel development.
And it probably makes the code easier to navigate for the developers, right?
So much easier.
And I'm working on, let's say, the flight search feature.
Yeah.
I know exactly where to find everything I need.
Exactly. You don't have to go hunting through a bunch of different files and folders.
But as we discussed earlier, we do need to be mindful of that potential code duplication.
Yeah, you don't want to repeat yourself too much.
Right, so using shared components and libraries is key.
Yeah, definitely make sure that if one slice figures out a clever way to handle location data, for example,
Right.
other slices can benefit from that.
Share that knowledge.
Exactly. It's all about finding that balance between keeping things self-contained,
Right.
but also avoiding unnecessary repetition.
Okay, now before we wrap up, I wanted to touch on something our notes highlighted, and that was mobile-first architecture.
Oh, yeah.
What's that all about?
So this is a design philosophy that really emphasizes prioritizing that mobile experience.
Okay.
Instead of starting with a desktop app and trying to make it work on a smaller screen,
Yeah, like shrinking it down.
you design specifically for mobile from the beginning.
Makes sense?
You think about touch interactions, limited screen space, the need for efficient data usage.
Yeah, because data is precious, especially when you're on a mobile network.
Absolutely.
So it's about creating an app that feels like it was made for a mobile device,
Yeah, truly native.
not just a shrunken down version of something else.
Exactly, and it goes beyond just the interface.
Okay.
You consider things like battery life, network connectivity,
Mhm.
the fact that users might be on the go and only have a few moments to interact with the app.
Right, they might be distracted, they might be walking down the street.
Exactly, so you have to make every interaction count.
This has been a fascinating deep dive. I feel like we've gone from these foundational concepts of clean architecture and vertical slice architecture
Yeah.
to really seeing how they apply in this unique world of mobile app development.
And how these seemingly technical decisions actually impact the apps we use every single day.
Yeah, and we've learned that a well-architected app is more likely to be stable, scalable, and secure.
And that means a better experience for the user.
Exactly. And maybe even more importantly, I think understanding these concepts, it empowers us to be more informed consumers of technology.
Absolutely. We can ask better questions about the apps we use
I
and
think-
make more informed choices about which ones we trust.
So next time you're downloading an app, take a moment to appreciate that hidden architecture that makes it all work.
Yeah,
It might be invisible, but its impact on our digital lives is undeniable.
it really is. And, the world of software development, it's constantly evolving.
Oh yeah, for sure.
As new technologies emerge, architects and developers, they're going to keep finding new ways to build those apps of tomorrow.
So until our next deep dive, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep appreciating the amazing world of software that surrounds us.
Absolutely. It's an exciting space to be in.